Today on RoxomTV News, the United States captures Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and brings him to New York to face federal charges. In Minnesota, Governor Tim Walz steps out of the race for a third term, reshaping a key governor's contest as Democrats weigh their next move. And in Switzerland, pressure is mounting for answers after a deadly New Year's Eve bar fire leaves dozens dead and raises serious questions and safety concerns. All that and more on today's show. Let's get into it. Well, we're starting our first episode of 2026 with some breaking news here this morning, as Venezuela President Nicolás Maduro has pleaded not guilty to criminal charges tied to drug trafficking and terrorism. He told the judge he was innocent and a decent man. U.S. prosecutors argue he led a state-backed cocaine trafficking network operating across all of Latin America. Now, Maduro's government has consistently denied these allegations, calling them politically motivated and illegitimate. His next court appearance is now set for March 17th. Now, this news comes only after him being captured by the U.S. over the weekend. Here are the first images of Maduro arriving in New York. Let's take a look. So as the images we're seeing spread globally, attention has quickly shifted from how the operation unfolded to what comes next. Now, Trump's administration has framed the capture as both a law enforcement action and part of a broader pressure campaign, linking it to U.S. demands on oil access, drug trafficking, and migration enforcement. Secretary of State Marco Rubio emphasized that the operation was not an invasion and was not designed to seize Venezuela's oil fields. Let's listen to how Rubio framed it.
Why wasn't congressional authorization necessary?
It wasn't necessary because this is not an invasion. We didn't occupy a country. This was an arrest operation. This was a law enforcement operation. He was arrested on the ground in Venezuela by FBI agents, read his rights, and removed from the country. You can't congressionally notify something like this for two reasons. Number one, it will leak. It's as simple as that. And number two, it's an exigent circumstance. It's an emergent thing that you don't even know if you're going to be able to do it. We can't notify them we're going to do it on a Tuesday or on a Wednesday, because at some points we didn't know we were going to be able to carry this out.
Now, at the same time, President Trump made clear that further military action remains on the table and suggested the United States could temporarily oversee Venezuela until a political transition takes place. Here's Trump's first public reaction. Let's take a listen.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And we are ready to stage a second and much larger attack if we need to do so. So we were prepared to do a second wave if we needed to do so. We actually assumed that a second wave would be necessary, but now it's probably not.
Now, inside Venezuela, power has shifted, at least temporarily, to Vice President Delcy Rodriguez. You see, Rodriguez initially condemned the United States operation as illegal, but later called for cooperation with Washington within international law, a shift that appeared to open the door to negotiations. Now, Trump responded by publicly demanding what he called total access to Venezuela's oil sector. International institutions are now scrambling to respond. The United Nations Security Council is meeting to discuss the legality of the operation, and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that the capture could set a dangerous precedent. Meanwhile, the European Commission said it sees an opportunity for a democratic transition. Let's hear what they had to say.
So on your first point, I would like to mention the opposition, and in particular Edmundo Gonzalez and also Maria Corina Machado, who have fought tirelessly for democracy and human rights in Venezuela, and they have also led in 2024 the Venezuelan people to peacefully exercise their right to vote. We have millions of Venezuelans that have voted for change, and they have supported Edmundo González by a significant majority, according to what we had available. So the next steps are about dialogue towards democratic transition, which must include Edmundo González and Maria Corina Machado.
Now, despite a lot of the new information we've received in the last 48 hours, several unresolved questions still remain. Who governs Venezuela in the interim? Whether Washington will push for structural changes to the oil sector, how global powers respond at the United Nations, and whether this operation becomes a one-off or a precedent. Let's break this story down, starting with how this will impact the market. You see, markets have reacted calmly, but not casually to the news. Global equities largely shrugged off the shock of Maduro's capture, with stocks rising across Asia and Europe, and U.S. futures trading higher. Analysts say the muted response reflects Venezuela's relatively small role in global oil supply and the belief that any economic impact will take years to materialize rather than trigger an immediate shock. Oil prices tell a similar story. Brent crude slipped towards $60 a barrel despite the upheaval, as traders focused on oversupply and OPEC Plus decisions to keep production steady. Venezuela currently produces less than 1% of global oil output, meaning short-term disruptions can be offset elsewhere. Now, the larger oil story is about long-term leverage, not immediate barrels. President Trump has explicitly tied the operation to reopening Venezuela's oil sector, with Bloomberg estimating that a full revival could require $100 billion in investment over the next decade. Here he is talking about it. Let's take a listen.
As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust, for a long period of time. They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping and what could have taken place. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country.
Now, U.S. officials have told oil majors that large capital commitments would be required to recover debt from past expropriations, raising risk calculations for boards and shareholders alike. China is reassessing its exposure. Bloomberg reports China's top financial regulator has asked major banks to detail their Venezuela exposure following the U.S. operation, highlighting concerns tied to billions in outstanding loans. Now, if U.S. creditors gain seniority in a post-Maduro restructuring, Chinese lenders could face higher repayment risk. Europe is tightening asset controls as well. Switzerland said it has frozen any assets held by Maduro and his associates. On X, they posted this photo right here. It says, with immediate effect, Switzerland is freezing any Swiss-based assets linked to Nicolás Maduro. If any assets turn out to be of illicit origin, Switzerland will do its best to ensure that these benefit the Venezuelan population. Now, that move is intended to prevent capital flight and preserve funds for potential legal proceedings. Venezuela's defaulted bonds have rallied on expectations of political change, with total external liabilities estimated between $150 and $170 billion. For distressed debt investors, this is no small event. Now, let's take a look at how the U.S. actually captured Maduro. You see, U.S. officials say the operation was months in the making. Intelligence and military planners rehearsed the raid using a full-scale replica of Maduro's Caracas safe house. CIA operatives tracked Maduro's movements with the help of a source close to the Venezuelan leader. Now, the operation, known as Operation Absolute Resolve, involved more than 150 aircraft, including fighters, bombers, surveillance planes, and electronic warfare assets. Strikes targeted Venezuelan air defenses and military sites around Caracas, plunging parts of the city into complete darkness. Now, the troops reportedly came under fire while approaching Maduro's compound. They carried blowtorches to breach reinforced steel doors if necessary. Inside the residence, Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, surrendered after failing to reach a secured safe room. Maduro was then extracted by helicopter. That's when Trump posted this picture on X after leaving Venezuelan airspace. He was transferred to U.S. custody and flown to the United States. Now, power in Caracas has shifted to Delcy Rodriguez, Venezuela's vice president and oil minister. Rodriguez is a longtime loyalist to Maduro, but is viewed as more pragmatic and technocratic than many within his inner circle. Often referred to as the Tsarina, she has held senior government roles for more than a decade, including foreign minister and finance minister. She played a central role in stabilizing Venezuela's economy after years of hyperinflation by implementing spending cuts, currency controls, and limited engagement with foreign oil firms like Chevron. U.S. officials cited by Reuters described her as the most plausible interlocutor in a post-Maduro environment. Now, President Trump, however, appears less focused on diplomacy than pressure. He has openly threatened additional military action if Rodriguez's interim government resists cooperation. Trump has demanded total access to Venezuela's oil infrastructure and warned Rodriguez that refusal could bring consequences worse than Maduro. Now, that pressure extends far beyond Venezuela. Here's Trump on Air Force One talking about it.
No, we're in the business of having countries around us that are viable and successful, and where the oil is allowed to freely come out because that's good. It gets the prices down. That's good for our country. Now, we have a very sick neighbor. It's not a neighbor, but it's close to a neighbor, and that's Venezuela. It's very sick. Colombia is very sick, too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States, and he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you.
You just wait for Cuba. Cuba is a communist dictatorship that's killed priests and nuns. They've preyed on their own people. Their days are numbered. We're going to wake up one day, I hope in 26, in our backyard, we're going to have allies in these countries doing business with America, not narco-terrorist dictators killing Americans.
Now, analysts say that these threats are designed to deter regional support for Maduro's allies. Rodriguez has publicly condemned the capture as illegal while simultaneously calling for cooperation with Washington. The balance she strikes may determine how this crisis actually unfolds. Now, outside of Venezuela, reactions have been immediate and emotional. Millions of Venezuelans who fled the country over the past decade have responded with public celebrations and cautious hope. Migrants across Latin America and Europe gathered with Venezuelan flags, celebrating the removal of a leader many blame for one of the largest modern migration crises. Since 2014, an estimated 7.7 million Venezuelans have left the country. Even inside Caracas, videos show residents shouting freedom from their homes. Let's take a listen. In Argentina, home to one of the largest Venezuelan communities, celebrations unfolded in Buenos Aires. In Switzerland, a Venezuelan interrupted a pro-Maduro rally declaring Maduro is a criminal. Let's listen in.
Aquí está un venezolano perseguido político. ¡Abajo Maduro! No me toques, no me toques, no me toca.
Now, these celebrations that we're seeing coexist with uncertainty. You see, some exiles express concern about instability, reconstruction, and whether change will be lasting. In the United States, a Venezuelan girl addressed pro-Maduro protesters directly. Let's listen.
I heard you're from Venezuela.
Yes, I'm come from Venezuela.
And you don't agree with any of these people here, right?
No, I'm not agree. I'm not agree with Trump because Trump helped to my country obtain the libertad.
Can I ask you, there's a bunch of Americans here who have never
lived in a communist and socialist country with a socialist government.
So Americans are protesting here against the arrest of Maduro. They've never been to Venezuela before in their life, and you have, but they stand against the Venezuelan people. How do you feel about that?
I feel happy. We're so fucking happy.
or in Margarita Island or in the Llanos? How do the people in the Llanos feel about that?
Are you
I'm
living?
asking you the
No,
question.
I'm asking you.
Have you been to Venezuela? Have you been to
I lived for
Venezuela?
the last
But I know about
21
that.
years in Venezuela with a communist and socialist government.
So-
Your guys
and
don't
let me-
have idea
Let me give you
about
some
the
advice.
communists.
Let me give you some advice.
Don't have idea.
Let me give you some
The
advice real
communists.
quickly. All these people in shirts are going to surround you here in a second. They're going to try and drive you out over there where you perceive to be you have your freedom of speech amendment.
Now, what we're seeing here, gang, this wasn't simply the removal of a leader, okay? This was a recalibration of what power looks like in public. You see, for decades, the United States avoided openly acknowledging regime change as a tool even when outcomes suggested otherwise. This time, there was no ambiguity. A sitting head of state was captured, flown to the United States, and placed into the criminal justice system. Now that framing, it matters. See, calling this law enforcement rather than invasion gives Washington legal cover, but it also redraws the line between sovereignty and accountability. You see, if this holds up in court, it sends a message that certain leaders are no longer insulated by borders or titles if criminal charges are already on the books. And that is a profound shift. It tells authoritarian leaders that international arrest warrants are no longer theoretical. It tells allies that cooperation may be expected, not requested. And it tells rivals that the United States is willing to act first and litigate later. There is risk in that posture. Once a precedent exists, other powers will study it closely, especially those eager to justify their own extraterritorial actions. Now, Washington will argue that Maduro's case is unique, grounded in narco-terrorism charges and years of documentation. Other governments, though, may not be so careful with distinctions. At the same time, this move may resonate far beyond the borders of Venezuela. Leaders who once relied on political stalemate, diplomatic inertia, or regional protection are now forced to reconsider how permanent power really is. For markets, this introduces a new variable. For diplomacy, it compresses timelines. And for international law, it raises questions that won't be answered quickly. Was this accountability catching up to a criminal regime, or the beginning of a more aggressive era where power decides when the rules apply? That answer won't come from today's headlines. It will come from what Washington does the next time it claims this authority. Because after this, the world knows the option exists. All right, joining us to talk about this story and others today, one of our good friends of the program, Mr. Stephen Big Beat Orr. Stephen, Happy New Year, Happy Monday. How are you? Always great to have you on the show.
I'm good, Hank. Listen, Happy New Year, man. And it's going to be a good 2026. And this is not how I thought that 2026 was going to start with invading another country. Look, he's a bad guy. I mean, Nicolás Maduro was not a good guy, but we have several dictators around the world that are bad people. Why did he choose this one? And, while you hear the word narco-terrorism, Venezuela has the largest supply of oil in the world that we know of, right? So that I think is why we've invaded. So it's good to be able to do two birds with one stone, right? Take out a bad guy and take over a country. But the words I keep hearing is Monroe Doctrine. I've kept hearing all the things that people are trying to make this happen, and it's legal. And take the guy to New York to be prosecuted. Why New York? Why not Miami? Why not San Francisco? Why there specifically? So when I think about the future of the United States and why we did this, it's not about one issue. And I think, to me, it's about realigning the United States with where we are with the rest of the world. Does this give China now the right to invade Taiwan? Does this produce another place of warring somewhere else that we weren't ready for, that a dictator says, well, if they do it, we can do it? I think this gives the president what he likes is leverage. And I think the leverage we're looking at is Russia, Ukraine. Why is that? Because Russia is relying on a lot of this money for oil, right? They're running on oil. That's where the oil was going to, right, on the last shipment that we seized. And that shipment of oil is now coming to the United States. So there is a different realignment here that's happening. And the second question you have to ask, is this a one and only and done? And the president says no. He says if that Venezuela does not cooperate, then we will go right straight. We'll do it again. If Venezuela doesn't cooperate, and Colombia doesn't cooperate, or Cuba doesn't cooperate, we're going to go into those countries. So all of a sudden, this is not a one-off, one-time thing. This is a realignment. And I think the question has to be asked, how does Maduro do in court? As he hired now, looks like a pretty good attorney here. He's hired Assange's attorney, right? He has been screaming and yelling in court all day that he is innocent, which we all know he's probably not. But at the same time, we have to worry about it from the market side. We've got to understand it from a realignment of a world side. Some of the countries at the UN is already condemning this. Some are praising this. You saw this, a lot of praise from the lady that you saw the video on that's from Venezuela. So a lot of us have never been to Venezuela. I have been to Caracas, so I can say that I've been there. I don't understand the politics as well as somebody who's lived there many, many years, but I've been there a few times. I understand. I've been to Cuba, I've been to Havana. I understand the regime. But does that mean that we can invade another country willy-nilly and do this? And I think the difference is that this is not a normal invasion, and it's still an invasion.
Right.
In the past, we've invaded Afghanistan and stayed. Iraq, because they invaded Kuwait. So they had reason to go in there. This is not Operation Desert Storm or Desert Shield or what we did in Afghanistan. We called this a police action. The last time we called something a police action was in the 70s with Vietnam. So let's not make this a prolonged internment. Let's get in and get out, and let's do what we need to do. The question is, now the president has said we are going to stay in the country and fix the country until we can have free elections. Now, the last time we did this was this little country called Vietnam. So, we have to kind of see what Trump is thinking and leave it to them right now. They are in power. They were duly elected. So we have to see it right now. But right now, the question mark is, where do we go next? What do we do next? How do we apply past doctrines to what we have today? This is not the Monroe Doctrine. We need to stop saying that. This is Trump 2.0 doctrine and how he has to handle it. I do like the way that Trump has handled this in a way that it's not prolonged internment. It's not prolonged engagement. It's went in and took out the guy in three hours. Precision. CIA operatives, a very strong Night Stalkers, and came out. So if that's the case, Hank, I think this is not bad. The question is, what's next? Who's next? And he told you, Cuba. He's told you, Colombia. He has gone under the moniker that we're going to do some narco-terrorism, and he's done it under the moniker that we are going after assets. He has frozen the assets, including Switzerland has frozen the assets of the country, and we've taken their gold and their oil. So what's next, and how do we do it? And I think that's the question that you and I will have to ask probably next week as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this new news is actually giving us a lot more questions than we had before, specifically with Precedent. Now we have, as you mentioned, Cuba, Colombia. I know Denmark already came out and made a statement regarding Greenland. They're like, hey, Trump, keep your eyes off of Greenland. We can't let you do that there, too. But another thing I want to kind of bring this back to, and you touched on it briefly, Big Beat, was the markets, right? Because since the U.S. captured Maduro, the markets didn't recoil. In fact, they've moved higher since then. We've seen Bitcoin go up around 94K. The Nasdaq, last I checked, was over 200 points in the green. The Dow was up over 600. So my question for you, Stephen, is when markets rally into a moment this dramatic, are they signaling confidence that the situation is contained, or are they simply choosing to focus on liquidity and momentum over the headlines right now? Where do you think this is going to bring the markets in the wake of this news?
Clarity. Clarity is the word I would use. I think when I was asked over the weekend when it happened, I was like, I don't think this is good for the markets. I'm not really sure, but let's see how Sunday plays out. And so Sunday played out a little bit different than Saturday. We got to understand what had happened. It wasn't a total invasion. That's good. But we have a glut of oil in this country, and we're going to have even more oil coming in the country. Price of gold and stability will tell us, silver has run up. That's not a good sign if you're believing in stability. But clarity is the key in any business. Clarity is the key in any markets. And we're pretty clear right now what Trump is going to do and what he's saying. He's saying, look, stay out of our hemisphere. We're going to handle it on ourselves. Hey, Europe, you got your own problems. stick it over there. So I don't like that Monroe Doctrine. I never have. Only a few presidents have used it in the past. Not a lot, but it's a new type of doctrine. And I think that's clarity is becoming a lot more clear about what Trump wants to do. He's been talking about what he wanted to do, but now we saw it. We saw it clearly, and in, as I call it, the CNN-style war we have that we didn't have with Iraq-Iran, where we saw it on television, the bombing, and it went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we saw the oil fields lighting on fire in Kuwait. We didn't see that this time. The first pictures were not really of the bombing of Caracas. It was seeing Maduro on Iwo Jima. So this is a different type of argument, the narco-terrorism argument. It's a different way of looking at how we're going to take out dictators. I would say he made it very clear about Cuba. I think Canel has to worry about it. I think Colombia has to worry about it. And Sheinbaum of Mexico has to worry about this. I mean, she's already turned off any meetings with Trump over the next 2 weeks, I think is what she said now. That's an issue. We need to have better neighbors. Our neighbors have to be clean and clear. I mean, Cuba is 90 miles away from the United States. Mexico and Canada are our neighbors physically. So we got to understand the physicality of the next level of these, entrances into the country and how we're going to capture the next quote, quote, dictator. We know Canel is communist. We know that. He says he is. We know that Sheinbaum is duly elected. We know that in Colombia, we know that there is a narco-terrorism going on. Is it at the level that was in Venezuela? We don't know the answer to that yet. But I have never heard of a time in our history, of any period, of any country, where the war on drugs worked. Just say no. We're going to say no again? No, it doesn't work. We cannot legislate morality. So if we start to legislate morality and we start to go after countries because of that, I don't think that's right. I think what's right is going after a country because they are a dictator, because they are an oppression of a country. And tyranny anywhere is a tyranny, is oppression everywhere. So yeah, I like what Trump did with Maduro. I like what he's thinking about in Cuba, and I like it in Colombia, if Colombians really are doing that. But Mexico, I don't know, sir. That to me is pushing the limits. We have the CMCSA, we have NAFTA, we've got places that put our borders in place for a reason. And so we want that freedom, not just to be the freedom of our own country, but the freedom to travel anywhere and everywhere. So I understand the Trump 2.0 doctrine, or I guess they're calling it Doctrine now, I guess. But let's talk about it in 2 weeks, Hank, and see what the president has had planned in mind. He has had this plan for over weeks now. We know that they did not go into Venezuela 4 days ago because of the weather. So this has not happened in Saturday. This has happened weeks and months ago in perfect planning, and that's what we needed. So we need to see what else is already in the works, what will also come to fruition, and then I think we can all make a better decision. We can't play curator of what the president's thinking until after we know what he's done it. We can see the protests, and I said this on your show the last 4 times. The biggest protest right now could change regime in Iran. Do we go to Iran? And we've already heard that Khomeini is saying he wants to go to Moscow. So has what's happened here in Venezuela set off a chain of other things that could happen, beginning also in Colombia, Cuba, Iran, Russia, Ukraine? We've got a lot of things, and China and Taiwan. So I don't think this is a one-off thing. This is a thing we have to watch for a lot of chain reaction events.
Yeah, it certainly sets an interesting precedent, and it does feel like the first domino of maybe Trump's second year in office and this second term of his. So I'll be very curious to see where this lands in the next couple of weeks, just like you mentioned. All right, we're going to move on to our next story here at Big Beat. As one of the most closely watched governor's races in the country just changed, Overnight, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz announced just hours ago that he is dropping out of the race for a third term, ending what many expected to be a tough and bruising re-election fight. Now, Walz's decision immediately upends the political landscape in Minnesota and opens the door for a major Democratic reshuffle. Now, the two-term governor, who served as the Democratic vice presidential nominee in 2024, acknowledged that a massive welfare fraud scandal in the state played a role in his decision. In his statement, Walz said that spending time defending his own political future would distract from holding accountable those who exploited government programs meant to feed children. The scandal involves hundreds of millions of dollars stolen from COVID-era aid programs, with dozens of people already charged with felonies. Walz himself is not accused of any wrongdoing. Still, Republicans were eager to tie the governor to what has become one of the largest fraud cases in Minnesota's history. Privately, some Democrats were also growing uneasy. A senior Minnesota Democratic lawmaker speaking anonymously said Walz is not corrupt, but questioned whether he handled the situation well enough to remain electorally viable. Now, with Walz stepping aside, attention now turns to Senator Amy Klobuchar. Sources say Klobuchar is seriously considering entering the race after meeting with Walz over the weekend. She has not made a final decision, but allies note she has consistently outperformed other Democrats in statewide elections, including Walz himself. If she runs, Democrats believe she could quickly stabilize the race in what remains a competitive state. Republicans, meanwhile, are heading into a crowded primary field that includes MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell, Minnesota House Speaker Lisa DeMuth, State Representative Kristen Robbins, and attorney Chris Maydell. The Republican Governors Association wasted no time celebrating Walz's exit, calling his departure a reflection of failed leadership and mismanagement. Now, why this should matter to viewers at home is bigger than one state. This race will now be an early test of how much political damage large-scale fraud scandals can inflict, even when leaders aren't personally accused. And with national ambitions, Senate power dynamics, and party leadership all intersecting here, Minnesota just became a state to watch again. Bringing Big Beat back. Stephen, Tim Walz isn't accused of any personal wrongdoing, but he's stepping out of the race anyway after massive fraud scandals unfolded on his watch. For people watching at home who don't live and breathe politics, why would a governor choose to step aside under those circumstances instead of staying in and defending his record? What do you think?
Well, as you know, Hank, I do live and breathe politics. I grew up in it and employ the White House. I can tell you right now, where there's smoke, there's fire. Goodbye, Tim. You do not step out of a race unless you think you, A, can be beaten, or you are guilty of something, right? Or you handled the situation wrongly. I think all three things. He did not do good in any of it. Here's what's scary to me. The guy became a heartbeat away almost from being the vice president of the United States. And here's a better thing for all of us pro-crypto people. Amy Klobuchar being out of the Senate, now being in the governor's race in that state, could be pro-crypto for all of us. Could be good for Bitcoin because she's very anti-crypto. So there's a lot of good things out of this. Yeah, Tim, goodbye. You don't say things like, oh, well, I'm going to step out of this race because it's distracting. Yeah, it's distracting because you probably did something, right? Or your poll numbers are bad. Yeah. That's why you step out of a race. So, no, goodbye, Tim. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, and it kind of begs the question, right? Like, Walz says that staying in the race would pull focus away from fixing the fraud problem itself. But in your view, Big Beat, does stepping aside actually help the state move forward? Or does it kind of keep the spotlight on the scandal even longer? Because like you said, where there's smoke, there's often fire.
Well, the president just sent 2,000 more troops into the state to look for fraud and immigration issues. And they have more than just an issue of fraud, but there's a large contingency of Somalians in the state. That's where when Somalians were immigrating back into the United States from, there were issues, we'll say issues in Somalia. There was a genocide going on. There's a reason why they came here. But they've also elected a very left-wing Ilhan Omar, right, a member of Congress in that district. And when you look at it from the perspective of politics, the state is still not going to change. It's a very Democrat state. And in fact, it's so Democrat, they don't even have the Democrat Party. It's called the DFL, Democrat Farm Labor. So they're even more left-wing than the Democrat Party is today. And that's going to change, I think. When you look at the next year or two of politics in the state of Minnesota, you have to wonder, is it going to change because of fraud? they've had fraud in the state for many years. And we know from a few of them telling us that they were going after that fraud already. But it seems like when they started to really peel back the onion, that there was a lot more fraud than they ever expected. And the president said it could go up to $50 billion, not $9 billion of fraud in the state. That's a bigger picture problem. And with that, that's why they sent more people in there. So no, Tim Walz knows he's in trouble. Tim Walz needs that demographic in order to win. And I think he just realized he lost. Amy is very popular in the state. And I do like her personally. I know her personally. But I'll tell you that, no, she is very popular, and Tim Walz couldn't light a candle to her when it comes to a personality or her ability to govern. So when that comes to the power play, I think that it's good for both crypto. It's good for the state because they're not going to change. They're not going to be a Republican in that seat now. So it's a good thing. They have somebody who knows how to govern and can help fix a lot of those problems. And she is a stalwart for rooting out crime. We see that in the way that she's acted and done her job in the U.S. Senate. So I think very good things have come out of Minnesota, and I like this a lot. So well done.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, unsurprisingly, we're seeing Republicans out there already framing Walz's exit as kind of proof of a broader mismanagement in the Democratic Party, right? Even though he's not charged with anything as of yet. So for the voters out there who aren't following every detail, Stephen, how persuasive is that kind of argument? And how often do you feel like it actually sticks that, hey, this happened under his watch, this is part of mismanagement on a larger scale? Do you think people buy into that?
The very second that a politician says, I did not have, or I did not do, or I was not a part of, they probably were, right? I mean, he came out so defensive, saying I did nothing wrong, and then he says, okay, I guess I'm going to drop out of the race. You just don't do that, Hank. I mean, if you are innocent, you stick around. Ask Bill Clinton. Ask Donald Trump. These guys were as guilty as it came, and they didn't even leave their office. So this guy must be even more guilty, or he's really scared of losing the election. So there is something here you don't, and he didn't drop out months after this revelation. He dropped out only after a few days. So that is what should speak volumes to it. So no, I think he's in serious trouble, and I wouldn't be surprised if charges weren't levied against him in the next few days or weeks.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of that when they always say, like, if you send an innocent man to jail for something that he didn't commit, right, the innocent guy will be up all night freaking out about it, but the guy who's guilty will fall asleep because he's already kind of assigned to the fact that he was caught. That's kind of feeling like what we're seeing from Walz right now, to your point, literally hours after this, you know, days. Yeah. So I think he might be on the right beat there, but not surprising. You are the big beat after all. All right, we're going to turn to Europe here for our next story. So hang 10 there, Steve. We'll be back to you in a second. Because right now there is a developing investigation going on in Europe as pressure is mounting this morning after one of Switzerland's deadliest nightlife tragedies. Authorities say all 40 victims of the New Year's Eve fire at the La Constellation bar have been identified. Now, most of the victims were teenagers. The youngest was only 14 years old. Prosecutors believe the blaze began when sparking fountain candles ignited the ceiling of the bar's basement, allowing the fire to spread rapidly through the crowded venue. More than 100 people were injured in the early hours of January 1st. Swiss authorities have opened a criminal investigation into the couple who operated the bar, examining potential charges including homicide by negligence. So far, prosecutors say there are no grounds for arrest, a decision that has sparked growing public anger and media scrutiny. Residents of Crans, Montana have gathered for silent processions while condolences have poured in from international leaders across Europe and beyond. Italian Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini publicly questioned whether safety inspections, emergency exits, and building materials were adequately reviewed. Investigators are now examining age verification practices, fire safety compliance, soundproofing materials, and whether the bar underwent required annual inspections. Now, one of the bar's operators has said the venue was inspected multiple times over the past decade and complied with regulations. Authorities are working to determine whether enforcement failures, overcrowding, or design flaws contributed to the rapid spread of the fire. Now, why this should matter to our viewers at home is not abstract. This tragedy highlights how seemingly small safety lapses can escalate into mass casualty events, particularly in confined spaces. The outcome of this investigation could lead to tighter fire safety rules, stricter inspections, and broader accountability standards across Switzerland and neighboring countries. For many families, those answers cannot come soon enough. We're bringing Stephen back. Stephen, this is the first and foremost a human tragedy, but history shows that disasters like this often lead to new rules, lawsuits, and tighter enforcement. When something like this happens in a country known for strong safety standards, how quickly do insurers, regulators, and businesses start reassessing risk after something like this? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Hank. First of all, anybody knows me. My heart bleeds for Switzerland. I love the country, the people. I mean, if you've never been to Zurich or to Davos, like I go to, it is an absolute gorgeous country with gorgeous people. They're just fantastic human beings that really do embody who Switzerland is. But this goes to the point of what happens when we deregulate. When you have normal standards that we have in this country, you don't want to get rid of rules for very opposite reasons. I mean, when you have, I mean, how many people haven't gone to the nightclub and had those sparklers come out? This shouldn't have burnt down a building. When you have doors, it should go out like normal regulations. So when you deregulate or you have a political party that wants to deregulate, you got to ask the question why, because these things can be avoided, Hank, and it should have been avoided. Should prosecution of the family that owns this club be prosecuted? If there was malfeasance and negligence, 100%. I don't believe that this family wanted to kill people, so I think that in and of itself is wrong. But somebody has to pay the piper, right? There has to be accountability, and we have to have closure. This should never happen in any country, in anywhere, at any club, because regulation. This should not have happened. This was avoidable, and I hope this is a deterrent to other clubs that want to go cheap, that want to skirt the laws or not follow regulation. Or, I mean, in this case, they let in 14-year-olds. Oh my goodness, that my heart bleeds for that family. But that's what happens, and we need to stop that, right? We as a country do not need to deregulate our own laws. We know what happens when things happen, right? We had the Pulse nightclub here in Orlando happen. We've had fires around the world that happened. It should not have happened. Regulation would have stopped some of that. If we had better security, if you look at it from the perspective of putting Roman candles into a champagne bottle, and we know that their ceiling was made of flammable materials, and the doors were the wrong. No, that should not have happened. So, yeah, we need to fix those problems and fix them quickly so that this never happens again.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a danger you're going to get anytime things aren't regulated, but this might even be a case where we need to tighten regulations, right? Because investigators are looking at inspections, building materials, overcrowding, while the bar's operators are saying they followed all the existing rules. So my question is, Stephen, from your perspective and experience, how common is it for something to technically meet regulations but still be dangerously unsafe? Is that something that happens often, you feel like?
Never. I mean, that's the problem with regulations. They're already in place, and we've got lots of laws. I mean, look at the U.S. Code sections. The books are out the door. But it's enforcement of those regulations that don't happen sometimes. And I think enforcement is the key to this, right? You need security officers. You need police, outside of these places trying to help. I mean, how long did it take for the security to get there? How long did it take for the fire departments to get there? A while, right? We know that. It was hard for them to break in those doors and they never got out. They were trapped in there. That should not have happened, right? So to me, it's about enforcement. To me, it's not about regulation, because we probably have those rules in place. It's about enforcement, and it's also about not deregulating these enforcements of these actual laws. So yeah, I agree with that.
And for businesses and investors out there that are watching this from the outside, what is kind of the signal that tells them that this won't remain an isolated tragedy and can actually lead to broader changes in safety standards, right? Like, what are the signals you think they're looking for right now?
The cost. The cost is outrageous right now. The insurance companies are you think a business wants to spend all that money on extra insurance? No, they don't. But they also don't want to have to pay out legal bills. They don't want to pay out funeral bills, which are going to have to now. You look at it from the perspective of business, they want to do the right thing. Businesses never want to do the wrong thing and have a black mark on their eye. And in this case, deaths on their balance sheets. This is terrible. So no, I don't think so. I think that businesses want to do the right thing. We always do. As a business owner myself, I always want to do the right thing, Hank. I never want to skirt the laws. I always say this body is not meant for an orange jumpsuit. But at the same time, we have to look at it from the perspective of businesses and what the costs are, and are they making a profit? Is regulation costing them so much? Is it too much regulation? I don't think so. I think there's a balance here that has to come to. When we look at regulation, business leaders need to have a seat at the table. Legislators need to have a seat at the table. Insurance companies need to have a seat at the table. And people that are affected by the CETA have a seat at the table. And they're the ones that are usually pushed out of the table. They're not the one because they don't have PAC money. Insurance companies have PAC money.
Right.
Businesses have PAC money to influence those leaders and those elected officials. So if I'm thinking about that, I want to have an equal say in all parts of that when legislation is coming around, when bills are being produced. Not just a lawyer from a business person writing another law that helps business people make more money. It's about the average everything. We have to think about it from the perspective of people. Now, did the lives of these people come under auspice because of maybe some lighter regulations or lighter tax or lighter security or all the things that could have added up? As I always tell people, a mistake is never made by one mistake. It's when you start to add them up. So it's not one mistake but letting the 14-year-old kid in. It's not a mistake of maybe the flammable ceiling or the waitresses bringing out the bottles way too close to the ceiling level. There was a lot of mistakes made here, right? So if any of those mistakes had not been made, we would not have had this tragedy. So a mistake it's not one error. It's when the errors multiply. And that's what we have to stop, is the multiplication of those errors. So let's get the right legislation, the right people involved in making this legislation, and then enforce it. And then things like this wouldn't happen.
Yeah, so true. I mean, that almost comes down to like a systemic or cultural issue, is if you're having all these mistakes that are going unchecked, of course, bad things are going to happen. And that kind of comes down to the systems that are in place, or lack thereof, I should say. All right, we're going to take a quick break here at RoxomTV News, but we're back. Steve and I are going to chat about our top Bitcoin story of the morning. So stay tuned. More top stories will be coming your way as soon as we return from this quick break. Welcome back to RoxomTV News. This morning, the Bitcoin price has surged back up to just underneath 94K. And I want to turn to global monetary policy, as one of the last holdouts of ultra easy money is signaling that the shift is far from over. You see, the Bank of Japan's Governor Kazu Ueda says the central bank will continue raising interest rates if economic growth and inflation continue tracking its forecasts. Now, that statement reinforces a historic pivot for Japan, which spent decades battling deflation with near zero rates and aggressive stimulus. Recently, the Bank of Japan raised its policy rate to 0.75%, the highest level in roughly 30 years, marking another step away from emergency-era monetary policy. Now, even after that increase, real borrowing costs in Japan remain negative. Consumer inflation has exceeded the Bank of Japan's 2% target for nearly 4 consecutive years, a sharp contrast to the deflationary pressures that dominated the country's economy for most of the past generation. Now, Ueda told leaders from Japan's banking sector that wages and prices are likely to rise together at a moderate pace, adding that gradually adjusting monetary support is essential to achieving sustainable growth. Markets are now focused on the Bank of Japan's policy meeting later this month, where updated forecasts could offer clearer signals on the pace and scale of future rate hikes. The yen remains weak, pushing up import costs and contributing to broader inflation pressures, and that weakness has fueled debate inside the central bank, with some policymakers arguing that further tightening is necessary to prevent inflation from becoming entrenched. Financial markets are already responding to that expectation. Yields on Japan's benchmark 10-year government bonds recently touched their highest level in 27 years, reflecting growing confidence that higher rates are here to stay. Now, why this should matter to audiences watching at home comes down to global spillover effects. You see, Japan is one of the largest holders of global debt and a major source of international capital flows. As Japanese rates rise, money that once sought yield abroad may begin flowing back home, influencing bond markets, currencies, and risk appetite worldwide. When Japan tightens, the effects rarely stay contained within its borders. We're bringing Big Beat back. Stephen, Japan spent decades fighting deflation with near zero interest rates, something that became almost part of its identity. Why is Japan choosing now to move away from that approach after so many years? What do you think?
There are 3 things involved here. Number one is that Japan has a new prime minister, and she is awesome, by the way. She is very pro-business, and she has a new cabinet in place. Look, I think a lot of people, a lot of the listeners, including my own friends, they think that Bitcoin is just an American thing. This is a worldwide product for everybody. And Japan is realizing that, and they've known it for a while. And I love Japan. I'll be in Tokyo soon. They get that. They realize in order to be a part of the worldwide picture, and the worldwide fintech and the worldwide asset classes, they got to be part of the crypto narrative. The old adage, first they hate us, second then they listen to us and they join us. Japan is right there. Japan is not a country that does not want to be a part of the world order. They want to be a part of the narrative that surrounds it. Now, when I look at the JGBs, and you just mentioned that earlier about the Japan's bond market, they are pushing up because rates are going up. But when rates go up like that, it means one thing, that they have to raise rates on the bonds to attract investors, right? So in order to raise the rates in the bonds, that means that no one's buying those bonds because it's going into something else. It's either going into an asset class like stocks in Japan, which is going up, or it's going into crypto, or it's going into gold, and so all of the above. It's going into commodities. We know that already. We've seen the run in silver. We've seen the run in gold. We've seen the run in... There's one missing on that. Is oil. And it is the petrodollar. So when you asked about the yen earlier, 157 right now, that's a pretty high. The yen is really struggling against the US dollar. The dollar has been falling lately. So why do I say that? That means less people are putting money into the dollar, and those countries have to use the petrodollar. So if the oil is staying low, the dollar is staying low, it's going to go somewhere else. And if the JGBs are not where it's going in the Japan's bond market, then where is it going to go? And the Japanese people are saying, you know what? I want crypto. So guess what? They're going to buy it. And that's where the money's flowing to right now. And you're going to see another, we saw it, 88,000 on the Bitcoin. We're at 94,400 right now. Someone's buying. Oh, guess we know who's buying? Michael Saylor, because he told you. Why is he buying it? He's not buying it because Americans are just buying it. He's buying it because the whole world is buying it. And Japan wants to be a part of that narrative. So good golly gumdrops, keep buying Bitcoin, keep stacking, because guess what? Any country that's against Bitcoin right now will wise up and go, you know what? I want to be like Japan. I want to join the narrative. So they are. And so you'll see this price getting back over to 100,000 before the end of January.
Yeah, and we're seeing that. You mentioned Bitcoin's up almost like $6,000, it looks like, in the last 12, 24 hours, whatever it is. But aside from Bitcoin, right, if Japanese capital starts flowing back home instead of overseas, Aside from the crypto market, who else is going to feel the impacts of that first? Will it be emerging markets? Is it U.S. bonds? Or will it continue to be these risk assets like stocks and crypto? What are your thoughts of the impact here?
That's a very interesting question, Hank. And the one thing I turn to is who are the biggest countries in the world with the most amount of money? And China. And
Right.
China has now dumped almost all of the U.S. treasuries. Now, I think they're completely almost out of it now. And that's creating a new world market. You're seeing, where is China going to put that money? Are they going to invest in themselves? Are they going to invest in Asian countries? Are they going to buy other African countries, especially with the United States invading Venezuela, right? Which is where China has had their fingers in, right? Russia has had their fingers in. So when we start to see the flow of central bank money, where is that banking money going to go? And we now know where it's going, especially Japan just told you. Japan says we're going to be buying crypto too. The United States has it on the balance sheet, right? We know other countries like Russia has it on the balance sheet. So expect massive flowing of massive money from countries, not even just Japan, but Asian countries around that area also moving money into crypto. And if China says we're not going to be part of that, great. But the Chinese people will still be buying crypto. So they would probably be buying it from the Japanese exchanges. And Japan realized that because guess who the biggest investor is in Japan? China. So all of a sudden now you see that, right? So you're seeing not just us buying the JPX with the Japan Exchange, but they're going to start buying other asset classes. And there's a massive appetite for crypto in the Asian market. I think another one you're going to see is South Korea, which has banned crypto. You are going to see crypto being a big deal there. So the buying there of asset classes outside the norm for Japan is going to happen and very rapidly. And I think like a domino effect is going to happen in the Asian markets, where Japan's going to be the beneficiary of that.
I mean, and right now, this is just an added layer to the very complicated geopolitical matrix we've seen continue to progressed over the last 24 hours here. And I know you have your amazing platform, Quasar Markets, that uses a bunch of different AIs to kind of sift through the noise and give people the accurate signal in markets like right now when things are kind of going a little crazy. Can you give us a little insight into that, Big Beat? Because I think right now, more than ever, this is a great time to have a tool like that and kind of level the playing field so that, traders like day traders like myself can actually compete against some of the big fish out there. So tell us, where can we go to check out Quasar Markets, and give us a quick intro as to what it can do, to help you make sense of times during seasons like this.
I appreciate that, Hank. Yeah, quasarmarkets.com is our website, and we're coming out with a new platform coming out in about a month. But what's interesting is I'm not trying to find out what the news of the day is. I already have that. Everybody has that. I want to know what's happening before it happens. So one of the cool pieces is I was able to find cocoa prices movements. I was able to find prices of silver long before it happened. Like I was buying silver at $19. Guess what's new? I have a new thesis coming out because of the platform. Orange juice prices should go up, right? And I know about the reasons behind it months and weeks before it happens. And so I want to build a platform that does that and walks in a trader and investor long before the news hits the cycle. I knew about things that were going on in Latin America. I just didn't know exactly what was happening, but my, shall we say, crystal ball in Quasar Markets was telling me that something's going on in Latin America. Be prepared. Why are we moving all these troops down to Latin America? Well, there was a reason for it, and now we know. Why was there a buildup in San Juan, in the Puerto Rico area? We know now, right? We know that they're not moving. They're still there. So we know that it's going to get bigger than that. I wanted to know that answer long before it happened, and that's what Quasar Markets was built for.
Yeah, it's an amazing platform. I definitely encourage everyone, if you haven't already, to go check it out, because we don't have all the answers, but that's why we have people like you on the show, Big Beat. It's absolutely a pleasure each and every time you come here and share your wisdom and expertise with us. So thank you again for coming with us today, joining us on our first show of the new year. And we're excited for an exciting 2026 here with you at RoxomTV, Big Beat. So as always, thank you for your time. And for those of you out there, go check out Quasar Markets. Thanks, Stephen. Always a pleasure. See you next time. Cheers. All right, we're going to take a quick break here at RoxomTV News, but when we're back, we got more of today's top stories that you're not going to want to miss, so stay tuned. We'll be back right after this quick break. All right, before we head into the rest of this morning's top news, I want to go over a quick recap of the top stories we had during the first hour of today's show. So first up, we had Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has pleaded not guilty to drug trafficking and narco-terrorism charges after being captured by the United States over the weekend. Also, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz announced he's dropping out of the race for a third term, citing the political toll of a massive welfare fraud scandal that unfolded under his administration. And public anger is growing in Switzerland after a deadly New Year's Eve fire at a crowded bar killed 40 people, most of them teenagers, with investigators now probing possible safety failures and negligence. So that brings us to the top story of this hour, where we're celebrating Bitcoin's birthday. It turned 17 over the weekend on January 3rd. Now, there was no celebration on Wall Street and no official acknowledgement from financial institutions, but January 3rd remains one of the most important dates in the evolution of modern money, because January 3rd is when Bitcoin actually began. You see, on January 3rd, 2009, the pseudonymous creator known as Satoshi Nakamoto mined what is now called the Genesis block, officially launching the Bitcoin protocol and the Bitcoin blockchain. Now, the first block, known as Block 0, isn't just the start of a ledger or a technical artifact buried deep in code. It is the foundational anchor of the entire system. Every transaction that has ever occurred on Bitcoin, every block that has ever been added since, and every Bitcoin in circulation today traces its lineage back to that single moment. Now, what makes the Genesis block different from every block that followed is that it doesn't reference a previous block. There is no history behind it. It stands alone, hard-coded into the protocol, immutable and permanent, acting as the origin point for everything that came next. Embedded within that first block was a message. The Times, January 3rd, 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. That line, taken directly from the front page of The Times, permanently ties Bitcoin's creation to the global financial crisis and the policy decisions that defined that period. Banks were failing, governments were stepping in, bailouts were becoming normalized, and trust in traditional financial institutions was eroding rapidly. Bitcoin didn't arrive with a press release or a marketing campaign. It arrived as an on-chain event with a timestamp that doubled as a commentary on the moment it was born into. That's why January 3rd carries such significance inside the Bitcoin community. Not because people decided to celebrate it, but because it is literally written into the blockchain itself. There's another detail that makes the Genesis block unique. It included a 50 Bitcoin block reward that is famously unspendable. Those coins can never be moved, and they were never meant to be. They function as a symbolic first issuance, a kind of cryptographic marker that binds Bitcoin's trust-minimized rules into code from day one. Now, in those early days, Bitcoin wasn't an asset class or a market anyone tracked on a screen. It was a small experiment shared among a handful of developers and cryptography enthusiasts. Hal Finney, one of the earliest contributors, famously received the first ever Bitcoin transaction, helping test whether this new system could actually function in the real world. Old forum posts, early emails, and the first open source releases capture the curiosity of that moment as a tiny group of people explored whether money could exist without central control or trusted intermediaries. Those early artifacts are now part of Bitcoin's origin story, and January didn't stop being important after that first block was mined. You see, over time, January became something of Bitcoin's unofficial ceremonial month, not through design, but through repetition and shared experience. January 3rd eventually came to be known as Proof of Keys Day. On Bitcoin's 10th birthday, early Bitcoiner Trace Mayer encouraged people to withdraw their Bitcoin from exchanges and custodial platforms and hold it in wallets they personally controlled. The message was simple, but fundamental. If you don't control the private keys, you don't truly control the Bitcoin. Proof of Keys Day isn't just symbolic, it's practical. It serves as a reminder of why Bitcoin exists and what makes it different from traditional financial systems built on intermediaries and custodians. January also marks a major technological milestone in Bitcoin's history, January 8th, 2018. Now, that was the date of the first real-world purchase using the Lightning Network, Bitcoin's Layer 2 scaling solution, when someone paid for a TorGuard VPN subscription. It wasn't a large transaction and it didn't make headlines at the time, but it demonstrated something very important. Bitcoin could move quickly, cheaply, and peer-to-peer without relying on centralized payment processors. Since then, Lightning has grown into a major area of development and adoption, integrated into wallets and explored by companies looking at Bitcoin payments at scale. January 8th is significant for another reason as well. You see, back in 2009, that was the day Satoshi announced the release of Bitcoin version 0.1, the first public version of the software. Now, that release explained how to run a node, connect to peers, generate coins, and participate in a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. In many ways, January marks Bitcoin's conceptual birth, technical birth, and early adoption all at once. January isn't only important for historical reasons, though. It also has a notable track record in terms of price behavior. You see, historically, January has been one of Bitcoin's more bullish months, with the average and median returns around 9.9%, making it stronger than many other months on the calendar. And when you zoom out and look across Bitcoin's trading history, the pattern becomes even more clear. Over roughly the last 15 years, Bitcoin has only experienced 5 down Januaries, while the majority of the years saw the market start with gains. That doesn't mean January guarantees upside, and it certainly doesn't mean history will repeat perfectly. But patterns tend to form around behavior. New year capital allocation, fresh investment mandates, tax-related positioning rolling off, and narratives resetting after the calendar turns. January often becomes the point where momentum begins to rebuild. So the question is, what does January look like right now? Well, Bitcoin is already showing early signs of strength. It reached 94K this morning, a level it hasn't consistently held since late of 2025. And after reaching an all-time high of above $126,000 back in October, Bitcoin spent several months consolidating, allowing excess leverage and speculation to clear from the system. Now, this recent reclaim of the low 90,000s range suggests that renewed buyer interest rather than speculative frenzy. Historically, that's often how strong January moves begin. And January captures Bitcoin's journey better than any other month. It begins with the Genesis block, an embedded message about bank bailouts. It evolves into a culture of self-custody through proof of keys. It pushes technological boundaries through Lightning. And time again, it's the month where some of Bitcoin's strongest price tends to either begin or accelerate. At 17 years old, Bitcoin is no longer an experiment running on the fringes. It is infrastructure, a global, decentralized monetary network operating continuously without permission across borders and political systems. January doesn't promise upside, but it reminds us why Bitcoin exists, how it started, and why year after year, so much of the Bitcoin story seems to reset right here. We're going to take a quick break, but when we're back here at RoxomTV News, we're going to have a couple more of today's top stories that you are not going to want to miss, so stay tuned. We'll be back with more right after this quick break.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick, monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Are you interested in effortlessly growing your Bitcoin portfolio? I sure am. And the Bitcoin credit card by Gemini earns you Bitcoin back on every purchase. You can use it like any credit card. You can buy lunch, gas, or your weekly groceries, and you'll earn up to 4% back instantly in Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos straight to your account. All that with no annual fee. And right now, you can grab a $200 Bitcoin welcome bonus. It's the easiest way to start building your Bitcoin stack. Just go to Gemini.com to learn more. Welcome back to RoxomTV News. Next up, we're turning to a developing security story in the United States as authorities are investigating an incident involving a senior government official's residence. One man is in custody after allegedly vandalizing the Ohio home of Vice President J.D. Vance. The incident occurred shortly after midnight, according to law enforcement officials. Now, the vice president and his family were not at the residence at the time, and the U.S. Secret Service says the suspect damaged multiple exterior windows and a vehicle, but did not actually enter the home. Local police later identified the suspect as William DeFore, a 26-year-old Cincinnati resident. Court records show DeFore faces several charges, including vandalism, criminal damaging, trespassing, and obstructing official business. Authorities say that DeFore has a prior criminal history involving vandalism and has previously been ordered into mental health treatment following earlier offenses. Federal and local officials are now reviewing whether the incident was politically motivated or specifically targeted at the vice president or his family. So far, investigators say there is no evidence of a broader threat or organized effort. The Secret Service is coordinating with local police and the U.S. Attorney's Office as charging decisions move forward. Incidents involving public officials' homes are treated with heightened scrutiny due to the potential implications for national security. Now, why this story should matter to people watching at home goes beyond this individual case. You see, political tensions remain elevated across the country, and acts of vandalism or intimidation raise concerns about safety, escalation, and the boundaries between protest and criminal behavior. How authorities respond sets expectations for accountability while balancing civil liberties and public security. In an already polarized environment, even isolated incidents carry broader weight. Now, this next story that I want to talk about sits right at the intersection of immigration, technology, and where government power is heading next. You see, under President Trump's second term, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has begun routinely using a mobile facial recognition app to identify and arrest people suspected of being in the country illegally. ICE officers are now using a smartphone-based tool called Mobile Fortify, which allows agents to photograph a person in the field and quickly match that face against government databases. In practical terms, it means identity checks that once took hours can now take minutes. According to ICE and the Department of Homeland Security officials, the technology reduces mistaken detentions by confirming immigration status on the spot instead of holding people while records are manually cross-checked. Now, DHS says the app has already been used more than 100,000 times, pulling from prior immigration encounters, criminal records, and other government-held data. Officials also insist the system operates within existing legal authority and privacy rules and does not scrape social media or open source platforms. That assurance has done little to calm critics. Civil liberties groups and former DHS officials warn that widespread consent-free facial scanning raises some serious constitutional and privacy concerns, especially when used in everyday public settings. They also point out there appears to be no standalone privacy impact assessment filed specifically for Mobile Fortify. ICE counters that the system is designed to return only confirmed identity matches, excluding ambiguous results, and argues the technology actually reduces errors rather than expanding them. The app's origin story, well, it matters here. You see, Mobile Fortify was originally developed during the Biden administration for border enforcement, but DHS lawyers resisted using it for interior arrests. Now, that restriction was reversed after President Trump returned to office as his administration paired aggressive enforcement policy with record funding, including a $75 billion congressional infusion to accelerate deportations at scale. Now, why this should matter to our audience at home goes beyond immigration policy, as this signals rising federal demand for biometric surveillance and AI-driven law enforcement technology. Now, that demand could benefit companies supplying facial recognition, data analytics, and government tech infrastructure, even as it creates legal and regulatory risk for firms operating in this space. More broadly, this reinforces a trend that isn't slowing down. AI tools are moving from experimental pilots into routine public sector enforcement. And once that line is crossed, the debate usually shifts from whether the technology will be used to how far it will go. That's the real question markets lawmakers and the public will be wrestling with next. And if you want to see what artificial intelligence actually looks like when it moves from hype to real-world pressure, then look no further than American hospitals. You see, across the U.S., hospitals are rapidly adopting AI to deal with staff shortages. rising costs, and an administrative workload that has quietly become unsustainable. According to data cited by the Wall Street Journal, 27% of U.S. health systems now pay for commercial AI licenses, roughly triple the adoption rate seen across the broader economy. Now, that makes healthcare one of the most aggressive testing grounds for AI anywhere. Hospitals are deploying these tools to read medical scans, draft clinical notes, manage scheduling, and fight insurance denials, tasks that increasingly pull doctors and nurses away from patient care. In radiology and diagnostics, the gains are already tangible. At Northwestern Medicine, AI-assisted scan reviews have cut report times about 75 seconds to roughly 45 seconds, helping clinicians manage overwhelming caseloads without adding additional staff. Studies cited in the reporting show AI systems can spot subtle disease signals, including early indicators of breast cancer that may be missed between routine screenings. At Kaiser Permanente, predictive algorithms are credited with helping save hundreds of lives each year by flagging high-risk patients earlier than traditional methods. But the rollout hasn't been exactly smooth. You see, doctors report hallucinated medical references, fabricated studies, and AI-generated recommendations delivered with far more confidence than accuracy. Some hospitals have paused or rolled back AI tools after they produced misleading patient info or required so much human correction that the efficiency gains disappeared entirely. There's also concern about de-skilling, where clinicians become overly dependent on AI support and struggle when it's removed, a risk backed by studies showing performance drops once AI assistance is taken away. Now, despite those limits, hospital leaders argue AI isn't optional anymore. Aging populations, tighter budgets, and insurance complexity are forcing health systems to look for leverage wherever they can find it. Many report measurable financial benefits, including faster insurance, appeals, and millions of dollars recovered in revenue, while stressing that human oversight remains non-negotiable. Now, why this should matter to viewers at home is pretty simple. Healthcare isn't experimenting with AI for convenience, it's deploying it out of necessity. That makes hospitals the clearest, earliest signal of what AI can actually do at scale, where it breaks down and where human judgment still can't be replaced. And the lessons learned here are likely to shape how AI is rolled out across the rest of the economy. And turning to the intersection of tech and politics, a heated debate is building in the United Kingdom over the future of digital identity. Reports suggest British officials have discussed the possibility of extending the country's digital ID system to newborns as part of birth registration. The Labour government says the idea is being mischaracterized, and officials insist the digital ID system would only be mandatory for right-to-work checks and voluntary for accessing public services such as healthcare and benefits. Now, that clarification has done little to quiet the political backlash. You see, opposition conservatives argue that assigning digital IDs at birth risks creating a lifelong government record, raising concerns about privacy, surveillance, and long-term data control. Former Cabinet Minister David Davis warned that such a move would clash with Britain's historical resistance to centralized identity systems. Labour leaders counter that digital identity could simplify access to public services and reduce administrative burdens for families, pointing to international examples like Estonia, where digital identity begins at birth. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has framed this system primarily as a tool for immigration enforcement, arguing that stronger right-to-work checks are necessary to curb illegal employment. Now, the broader public response remains mixed. Polling shows many Britons support digital IDs in principle, particularly for efficiency and fraud prevention. Support drops sharply when questions arise about scope, consent, and whether voluntary systems could later become mandatory. A formal government consultation on digital identity is expected in the coming weeks, which could clarify how far the proposal may actually go. Now, why this should matter to audiences at home extends well beyond British politics, okay? Digital identity systems are spreading globally, intersecting with financial access, data ownership, and personal privacy. How the UK balances efficiency, security, and civil liberties may influence how similar systems are designed and adopted in other democracies. Once digital identity infrastructure exists, the debate shifts from whether it should exist to how it will, in fact, be used. Well, gang, that is it. That is a wrap for our first episode of Roxom TV News in the new year of 2026. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you haven't already, let's do the thing. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Roxom TV News, and me at Hank at Roxom TV on your doom-scrolling platform of choice, because we are only just getting started here in the new year, so we will have a lot more of the world's top news to bring you each and every day here at Roxom TV, and you don't want to miss it. So, wrapping up for today, but we'll be back tomorrow and we'll try to do better. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, and always be sure to hodl on. I'll see you guys Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in.